In 2026, buying a new truck no longer has to mean stretching your budget to the breaking point. Toyota's new $13,000 truck has entered the market and disrupted everything buyers thought they understood about vehicle pricing. Toyota's strategic silence. Everyone assumed Toyota would trumpet any major product launch. Yet this time, the company chose near silence. A move that overturned long-held assumptions about how global automakers introduce disruptive vehicles. The myth was that a breakthrough pickup would demand a dazzling reveal, heavy advertising, and a worldwide media wave. The reality was the opposite. Toyota deliberately withheld spectacle, rolling the $13,000 truck into select markets without the usual ceremonial buildup. This quiet entry was not hesitation, but strategy, crafted to avoid alerting rivals before the product could establish traction. Executives understood that a low-cost, durable platform would provoke immediate, competitive countermeasures, so they opted for stealth, letting the truck speak through utility rather than drama. The evidence lies in the release pattern: staggered regional rollouts, minimal promotional spend, and internal instructions to keep messaging understated. Analysts later noted that early adopters responded not to hype but to function, validating Toyota's belief that silence could amplify impact. By the time competitors recognized what had happened, the truck had already secured a foothold across multiple continents. This inversion of expectation demonstrated that disruption does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives disguised as ordinary. Toyota used that misconception as leverage, shifting the industry before anyone realized the ground had moved. Its quiet momentum reshaped expectations without resistance from the outset, and that strategic silence set the stage for an even deeper revelation ahead. If you're finding this breakdown eye-opening, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this industry shakeup. The manufacturing breakthrough behind $13,000. Everyone wondered how Toyota could possibly deliver a fully capable pickup for $13,000 when rival manufacturers struggled to keep entry models below 2 or even 3 times that figure. The problem was clear. Modern trucks are burdened by layered systems, expensive materials, and production footprints designed for complexity rather than efficiency. Toyota approached the equation differently, treating cost not as a constraint, but as an engineering problem to be solved at its root. The process began with platform simplification, using modular components that reduced assembly time and eliminated redundant fabrication steps. Engineers identified every point where a part could perform multiple roles, condensing systems without compromising structural integrity. They prioritized stamped panels over intricate castings, opted for proven powertrains that required no experimental tooling, and designed the chassis to be manufactured using existing global infrastructure. The result was not a stripped vehicle, but a streamlined one, a truck built with precision about where value matters. Internal assessments later showed that the simplified architecture improved reliability because fewer components failed and maintenance became. This outcome proved that affordability was not achieved through sacrifice, but through disciplined optimization. Toyota demonstrated that rethinking production philosophy can unlock possibilities competitors dismissed as unrealistic. Its engineering choices ultimately created a new reference model for cost-driven innovation that the industry can no longer ignore, and this foundation set up a larger philosophical clash ahead. Soon, Toyota's technology philosophy versus EV orthodoxy. Why would Toyota resist the global rush toward electrification when nearly every competitor framed battery technology as the inevitable destination? That question sparked confusion among analysts who assumed technological progress followed a single linear path. Toyota viewed the landscape differently, recognizing that innovation must match readiness, infrastructure, and cultural adoption rather than theoretical superiority. The company believed that premature transitions create fragility, so it positioned the $13,000 truck accordingly. Exploration of Toyota's internal thinking reveals a philosophy centered on appropriateness rather than novelty. Engineers prioritized technologies that aligned with global realities, asking not what was newest, but what was most suited to diverse environments. They evaluated technology as an ethical decision as much as a practical one, emphasizing that forcing unprepared markets into advanced systems can widen inequality and reduce mobility. This perspective reframed conventional thinking, challenging the the assumption that progress always moves toward complexity. Executives described technology as a tool whose value depends on timing, context, and user capacity. Instead of chasing electrification for its own sake, Toyota positioned the truck as a resilient platform, capable of serving regions where advanced infrastructure remains distant. The approach suggested that leadership lies not in speed, but in discernment. Toyota signaled that the future would not be defined by a single technological doctrine. It set expectations around usefulness, not the reverse. And this philosophical stance becomes tangible when viewed through daily working life. The socioeconomic role of work culture vehicles. In many working communities, a vehicle is not an accessory, but a cornerstone of daily survival, and the $13,000 truck entered these environments with immediate clarity of purpose. A case from a rural farming region illustrates the point. One family relied on unreliable equipment for years, losing time to breakdowns that threatened their livelihood. When they adopted the new pickup, the shift was dramatic. The truck's straightforward design meant it could navigate fields, transport goods, and endure long days without failing, giving the family stability they had never experienced. The human impact extended beyond single households. Small vendors used the truck to expand delivery routes. Construction crews used it to move equipment reliably, and market traders used it to reach customers who lived far outside paved areas. Every example demonstrated that dependable mobility acts as an economic multiplier. These communities were not seeking luxury or features. They needed a machine that matched the pace and pressure of their labor. The societal insight emerging from these stories is profound. When work culture vehicles become accessible, productivity increases, incomes stabilize, and local commerce flourishes. The truck functions not merely as transportation, but as infrastructure, enabling participation in the broader economy. Toyota's decision to prioritize functionality over sophistication acknowledged the lived reality of millions whose futures depend on reliable tools. And that grounding in human necessity prepares the narrative for a wider examination of how industries interpret progress. Competitor structural vulnerability exposed. This exposed a flaw no one wanted to admit, a weakness buried deep within the architecture of rival automakers' business models. For years, major manufacturers relied on high trim margins, complex option packages, and expensive feature bundles to justify rising vehicle costs. The diagnosis became unavoidable once Toyota released a truck priced at $13,000. Competitors discovered that their internal cost structures could not support anything close to that figure without collapsing profitability. Their factories were optimized for layered electronics, specialty materials, and engineering excess rather than disciplined efficiency. The breakdown was stark. While Toyota could scale production by leveraging modular platforms and long-standing supplier relationships, rivals depended on fragile ecosystems that required high retail pricing to remain viable. Their research priorities leaned toward prestige technologies, meaning they lacked a utilitarian product capable of matching Toyota's offering. The consequences were immediate. Analysts downgraded projections, shareholders demanded structural reform, and executives faced uncomfortable questions about whether their organizations had grown too dependent on luxury segments. Toyota's move transformed what appeared to be isolated weaknesses into visible pressure points across the industry. The release showed that complexity had become a liability, not an advantage. Rivals confronted a new reality that forced them to rethink fundamentals they once considered unshakable. And just as those corporations struggled to respond, another layer of disruption emerged where few expected it: dealer network disruption. The first people to panic were not global executives, but local dealers who instantly recognized how a $13,000 truck would destabilize their business model. Franchise operations typically rely on financing products, service contracts, and aftermarket packages to maintain profitability. Yet, Toyota's stripped-down pricing reduced the margin for these add-ons. As the chain reaction unfolded, dealers faced the prospect of customers demanding similar value across the lineup, making it difficult to push high-priced alternatives. Some dealerships attempted to apply traditional markups, but buyers refused to entertain inflated figures once they realized the base price was genuinely within reach. Other dealers struggled with inventory alignment, discovering that their existing stock of expensive models suddenly looked outdated beside the straightforward practicality of Toyota's new truck. The shift created tension between headquarters and franchise owners as both sides debated how pricing power should be managed in a changing market. Dealers in competitive regions reported that foot traffic Socioeconomic began favoring Toyota showrooms because consumers trusted the transparency implicit in a truck costing $13,000. This migration threatened multi-brand networks whose higher-priced vehicles seemed excessive by comparison. The disruption reached far beyond simple sales numbers. It forced the retail sector to confront a future where affordability dictated loyalty, and as dealers fought to regain footing, the next shockwave arrived from an unexpected psychological direction: consumer identity shift. This truck changed how people see themselves, challenging assumptions about what a pickup symbolizes. For years, consumers associated trucks with status, technological flourish, or rugged posturing. That belief shaped purchasing behavior, driving buyers toward models with ever-increasing features and price tags. The arrival of a $13,000 work-focused truck disrupted that identity narrative. Suddenly, ownership no longer hinged on lifestyle projection, but on practical alignment with daily life. The challenge emerged when buyers confronted the contrast between what they thought they wanted and what they actually needed. Many realized that prestige-driven designs offered little value to their routine responsibilities. The simplicity of Toyota's truck forced a reassessment of what defines usefulness, encouraging a shift from image-based preferences to function-centered decision-making. As this shift accelerated, a new identity formation took root. Drivers began valuing durability and clarity of purpose over displays of advancement, viewing their vehicles as tools rather than symbols. This psychological transition rippled across communities as conversations moved away from features and toward outcomes. The truck became an emblem of grounded self-reliance instead of aspirational branding. Cultural expectations evolved as more consumers embraced responsibility-driven purchasing, and this evolving identity resonated far beyond individual buyers, influencing how the entire supply chain interpreted demand. Supply chain power redistribution. One cheap truck just shifted global manufacturing power, revealing how a single product can reshape logistical relationships across continents. The micro-mechanism behind this change lay in Toyota's disciplined specification strategy. By limiting complexity, the company enabled suppliers to produce high volumes of standardized components, reducing production risks and stabilizing long-term contracts. Smaller vendors gained influence because their parts became essential to the truck's cost structure, while suppliers geared toward luxury materials faced reduced relevance. As demand accelerated, the macro outcome became apparent. Nations hosting efficient component factories experienced economic uplift, while regions focused on specialized or premium inputs saw diminished bargaining power. Shipping networks recalibrated routes to prioritize high-volume, low-margin goods that supported Toyota's strategy, prompting logistics firms to renegotiate capacity allocations. Supply chain researchers noted that the truck's success demonstrated a reversal of the prevailing trend toward hyper-specialization. Instead, the market rewarded suppliers capable of scalable reliability. This redistribution altered leverage dynamics, enabling Toyota to negotiate from a strengthened position while compelling competitors to reconsider their procurement philosophies. The shift did not merely highlight a new supply chain preference. It announced the arrival of a rebalanced industrial landscape. And this transformation sets the stage for even broader geopolitical consequences that unfold in the next one: national policy divergence. Governments saw this truck as a threat and reacted fast, each interpreting the $13,000 price point as a signal that their existing automotive frameworks were no longer adequate. The policy trigger arrived when analysts confirmed that the truck's affordability could rapidly expand vehicle ownership in regions where regulatory models were built around costlier imports. Suddenly, ministries responsible for transport, industry, and trade realized that Toyota had introduced a product capable of reshaping national mobility patterns. Some administrations issued incentives to encourage domestic assembly, aiming to capture the economic spillover. Others tightened standards, attempting to protect local manufacturers unable to match Toyota's price. Several nations launched formal reviews of tariff structures, questioning whether high import duties still made sense when low-cost vehicles offered developmental advantages. These choices gradually produced a national shift in policy identity. Countries embracing the truck repositioned themselves as mobility mobility-first economies, prioritizing practical access to transportation over theoretical commitments to advanced electrification. Those resisting it clung to existing frameworks, risking stagnation. The divergence revealed that automotive policy was no longer simply about technology, but about developmental strategy. And as governments recalibrated their positions, the global diplomatic environment felt the strain of this widening divide, setting the stage for rising tension across borders, trade alliances, and tensions. This low-cost truck created global friction, igniting competitive anxieties among nations that viewed Toyota's sudden price advantage as a threat to their automotive sectors. The conflict began quietly, as trade officials questioned how a foreign manufacturer could deliver a durable pickup at such an unprecedented price without violating existing agreements. Rumors spread about possible subsidy structures, leading to formal inquiries and behind-the-scenes complaints lodged through regional trade blocs. Negotiation followed as countries sought to protect domestic producers by proposing stricter rules of origin, updated tariff classifications, and new certification requirements. Toyota, operating across continents, was forced into diplomatic engagement, clarifying manufacturing processes to prevent penalties that could hinder distribution. Meanwhile, nations with limited automotive capacity saw opportunity rather than threat. They pursued realignment, forging alliances with Japan to expand assembly plants, build component networks, or secure preferential access to the truck. These moves redistributed influence across trade corridors, elevating regions long overlooked in global automotive discussions. The diplomatic landscape shifted as countries recalibrated alliances, seeking either protection or partnership. The truck became a reference point in treaty revisions, shaping the dialogue around competitiveness and national advantage. And as trade tensions evolved, the next fault line appeared not in boardrooms or ministries, but on factory floors, where workers confronted a new industrial reality. If you want to stay ahead of the changes hitting the automotive world in 2026, make sure you subscribe. Every new update reveals another shift you deserve to understand, and the next videos will take you even deeper into what comes next. Labor union mobilization. Workers saw this as a turning point, and they acted, treating Toyota's $13,000 truck not as a product, but as a catalyst, exposing the fragility of traditional automotive employment structures. The flashpoint event occurred when union leaders recognized that companies unable to produce low-cost trucks might resort to automation or offshoring to compete. That possibility alarmed workers who feared that efficiency measures would translate into job losses. Mobilization began as unions organized assemblies, demanding transparency about long-term corporate strategies. They framed Toyota's disruptive pricing as evidence that workers required a stronger voice in shaping production priorities. Calls for job security guarantees, retraining programs, and investment in regional plants gained momentum. Marches and coordinated slowdowns emerged in several industrial hubs, signaling that labor movements were no longer willing to absorb strategic shocks passively. Over time, these collective actions generated a visible power shift. Employers acknowledged that retaining skilled labor required collaboration rather than unilateral decision-making. Policymakers began meeting with union representatives to align workforce planning with national industrial goals. The movement reframed the definition of a competitive workforce, emphasizing resilience, adaptability, and shared interest. And with workers now exerting greater influence, the economic consequences of Toyota's truck extended far beyond factories, reshaping the trajectory of regional development. Regional economic acceleration. A simple truck can accelerate an entire region's growth. Here's how. Economic theory suggests that mobility acts as a foundational input for productivity, enabling labor, goods, and services to move more efficiently. When an affordable vehicle becomes widely available, the theory predicts increased participation in commerce and a rise in micro-enterprise activity. The real-world mechanism unfolded exactly as expected. In regions where transportation barriers historically limited economic expansion, the $13,000 truck created immediate opportunities. Farmers extended distribution reach, service providers expanded coverage zones, and small manufacturers accessed broader markets. Each instance translated into higher income potential and increased local spending. Over time, clusters of activity emerged around trade routes shaped by the truck's operating range. These clusters attracted investment in storage facilities, workshops, and logistics services, reinforcing regional economic networks. The outcome became visible in employment data and business registration registration trends, which showed a sharp rise in mobility-dependent enterprises. Economists noted that the truck functioned as a decentralizing force, allowing prosperity to spread beyond major cities into smaller communities. This redistribution of growth demonstrated how a single, reliable vehicle could alter economic geography. And with these shifts underway, attention turned to how such transformations would redefine long-term industrial strategy in the chapters ahead. The new global benchmark in value engineering. Value, not tech, just became the new benchmark, and Toyota's $13,000 truck marked the precise moment the global design paradigm began to shift. The old paradigm relied on escalating complexity, equating innovation with additional features, larger screens, and advanced systems that raised production costs year after year. This approach positioned vehicles as technological showcases rather than practical tools, and for a long time, that model shaped the design language of nearly every major manufacturer. The breakpoint came when Toyota proved that excellence could be achieved through disciplined reduction rather than expansion. Engineers focused on material efficiency, modularity, and structural logic, demonstrating that a product could embody strength and purpose without the weight of unnecessary sophistication. This single pivot exposed inefficiencies embedded across the industry and forced designers to reconsider assumptions they had accepted for decades. The new standard is emerging rapidly as teams worldwide reevaluate how to deliver durability, adaptability, and dependability without inflating cost structures. Value engineering is becoming the defining metric, replacing prestige-driven innovation with purposeful refinement that supports long-term usability. It encourages companies to prioritize intelligent simplicity, ensuring that every component contributes meaningfully to performance rather than complexity for its own sake. This change signals the start of a more pragmatic era in automotive design, one grounded in clarity of purpose. It invites manufacturers to think about vehicles as essential tools that must evolve with social and economic realities. And as value becomes the global expectation, the philosophical understanding of progress undergoes a deeper transformation that extends far beyond engineering decisions, shaping the intentions behind future mobility itself. Rethinking technological progress. What if progress was not what we thought it was? For decades, the myth persisted that technological advancement meant relentlessly moving toward complexity, automation, and electrification regardless of context. Critics argued that stepping away from this trajectory signified regression, a refusal to evolve with the times. Yet, Toyota's $13,000 truck forced the world to confront an uncomfortable possibility. Progress may instead depend on suitability, accessibility, and long-term resilience. The deconstruction of this myth begins with examining who actually benefits from innovation. When sophisticated features raise prices beyond the reach of most people, the market serves only a narrow segment, while ignoring the broader social and economic fabric that depends on practical mobility. Toyota challenged this assumption by demonstrating that restraint can be a higher form of advancement than excess. By prioritizing usability over spectacle, the company revealed that innovation is not merely about technological escalation, but about coherence with human needs. This shift unveiled a new framework for understanding progress, one built on alignment between technology and lived reality. The future is not a race toward the most advanced solution, but toward the most appropriate one, a direction that balances aspiration with accessibility. Practicality, sustainability, and adaptability become the pillars of genuine innovation rather than add-ons to justify increasing costs. This reframing compels industries to think more deeply about the purpose of their creations. It challenges them to consider whether they are solving real problems or manufacturing new ones. And as this mindset spreads, financial markets begin recalibrating how they measure opportunity and risk, rewarding companies that deliver meaningful, human-centered advancement. Investor behavior transformation. Wall Street quietly changed its strategy because of this truck. A trend emerged when analysts noticed that companies prioritizing affordability and durability outperformed brands locked into high-tech, high-cost roadmaps. Investors began to question whether long-term returns truly favored firms chasing cutting-edge systems with unpredictable adoption rates. Interpretation evolved quickly. Market psychology shifted toward valuing stable demand over speculative innovation. The $13,000 truck became evidence that simple, efficient products could generate consistent revenue streams across volatile economies. especially in regions historically overlooked by premium-focused manufacturers. Capital moved in new directions, flowing toward manufacturers capable of scaling low-cost platforms globally. Venture groups reassessed risk tolerance, reducing exposure to firms reliant on expensive infrastructures that required ideal conditions to succeed. Private equity firms began exploring portfolio strategies built around functional mobility and sustainable margins rather than futuristic bets with uncertain timelines. The forecast now points to an investment environment dominated by pragmatism, where proven demand outweighs theoretical potential. And as investors adjust course, everyday people begin to see the consequences of this shift reflected in the choices available to them. Vehicles designed for practicality rather than prestige become more common, financing structures become more accessible, and mobility gradually returns to a place where ordinary buyers, not speculative trends, shape the future. The future of personal mobility. This truck is not just changing the industry, it is changing your future. Today, personal mobility is fragmented by rising vehicle prices, uneven technological adoption, and widening gaps between urban and rural transportation systems. People face a tension between wanting reliable mobility and navigating the costs and complexities imposed by modern automotive design. The arrival of an inexpensive, durable truck disrupts that tension by reframing what mobility can look like in the coming decade. It introduces a model where practicality outweighs prestige and where access to dependable transportation becomes a universal expectation rather than a privilege reserved for a shrinking group of buyers. Tomorrow's reality points toward a world where ownership is more attainable, where vehicles function as practical extensions of daily life rather than luxury goods. Affordable mobility encourages broader participation in economic activity, expands personal freedom, and reduces dependency on overstretched public transport networks that often fail to serve remote or underdeveloped regions. As more companies adopt value-first design principles, consumers can expect a landscape filled with vehicles tailored to function rather than status. The future may include modular add-ons, adaptable interiors, and platforms built to evolve with user needs, rather than lock them into costly upgrades or technologically rigid systems. Such an environment allows drivers to shape their vehicles around real demands, not marketing trends. This shift brings personal mobility back to its core purpose, enabling movement, opportunity, and independence. And as this transformation unfolds, it becomes clear that Toyota's quiet disruption has reshaped not only an industry, but the trajectory of everyday life itself. Toyota's $13,000 truck signals a major shift in how vehicles will be designed, priced, and sold in 2026. What happens next will affect buyers far beyond this one model. If this analysis gave you a new perspective, like the video, subscribe for more industry breakdowns, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think affordable vehicles are finally returning, or will the industry push back?